The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive with Dr. Rebecca Risk. Do you ever feel that even though nothing seems seriously wrong and you pass all the medical tests, that you still feel that your health, pain, and fatigue are completely out of control? It doesn't have to be that way. Listen to the tips and suggestions given on our program today and take back control of your health. Now, here is Dr. Rebecca Risk.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Falling Through the Cracks. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Drew Ramsey. He is a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology and a fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Using the latest brain science and nutritional research, modern treatments, and an array of delicious food, he aims to help people live their happier, healthiest lives. Today, we're discussing his book, Eat Complete. So, Dr. Ramsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Risk. Good to be with you.
So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, Eat Complete really came out of my interest in helping patients to more effectively use food and other lifestyle management methods in terms of, I'm a psychiatrist. I work with folks who are struggling with anxiety and depression, and I wanted to consolidate what I've been learning over the last decade and really kind of update my last two books, The Happiest Diet and 50 Shades of Kale, with just a real dedicated nutritional psychiatry cookbook. And so I think I was inspired in part just by all the response that I've gotten, but also the growing interest in how food relates to brain health and just really seeing that begin to get some momentum.
You know, I think it's something that only has pressed recently, and over the years I've heard doctors tell people, well, food doesn't make a difference for you, so it doesn't matter what you eat.
Yeah, that seems like a strange statement. I don't know any trained medical professional who wouldn't endorse that food is the most important lifestyle factor and really most important risk factor under our control. I mean, that's very, very clear in the data at this point. This isn't it's interesting that food often gets pulled into the kind of quote-unquote complementary and alternative medicine chapters in books and in conferences, and it struck me as a little odd just that food is quite foundational. And so, I can't imagine any health professional in 2017 suggesting that food doesn't play a major factor in really most disease processes.
Well, it's, maybe this is in Canada, but I've had patients get laughed at because they're making changes in their life to eat better, and they're told, oh, you can't live like that, it's too strict, and doctors want to prescribe them, medication for the symptoms that they have from eating foods that don't work for them.
Yeah, I think it's a tense spot for a lot of physicians because in general we aren't really trained in nutrition very much, and then we often see patients go from extreme diet to from one to another, and I certainly can appreciate that frustration from some of my colleagues that you see people who are talking a good game about changing their lifestyle or maybe losing weight or getting healthier, and they come back month after month and they haven't. And that's the challenge that's facing physicians. You're recommending lifestyle changes, and patients sometimes aren't making them for a variety of reasons. And what the evidence suggests is certainly that that's where a medication is going to be most helpful to that patient, at least in the short term. So it's a difficult spot. Now, certainly we're not doing a good job of prescribing food and assessing diet in our healthcare systems, either in the U.S. or in Canada. But, we're seeing momentum, I think, us really working on having a healthcare system, not just a sickness care system, and that's where we need to go.
So, if it's difficult for doctors, because you say this in your book, and you said it now that there's not a lot of training for nutrition, and so what you've started to do is actually prescribe food. So, what does that mean for you and for your patients overall?
Well, I think it means that my patients and I are having more fun than other doctors. I think that's one part that's really clear to me, that I'm a psychiatrist, as I said, and so I talk a lot with people about very heavy subjects: depression, addiction, suicide, severe insomnia. It's really nice to also have a conversation about some great seafood recipes, or what it is they don't particularly like about nuts, and trying to think of some good swaps and creative ideas. So the way it looks in my practice, and I guess for all healthcare providers listening, I really want to emphasize there's a lot to learn, but it's not hard to get started. I was really kind of almost anxious to get started, just asking simple questions that mental health professionals are great at assessing and helping people make behavioral changes. So really, this type of work is right up our alley. And the way it works is just within every single patient I've seen, probably for about the last 10 years, I just make sure and ask them about food. And I ask them in a little more detail than just one question. I want to kind of walk through their life as an eater. I want to hear about, particular philosophies that they have that govern their eating. Some people are eating a vegan diet because they, are really against killing animals. Other people are eating a vegan diet because they've heard it's healthy and their cousin told them to. And so I really want to understand what cultural and moral values are driving eaters' choices. And then it's a very simple assessment looking at dietary pattern. Anybody who's focused on a singular nutrient or a singular food has really not been paying attention to the nutritional data coming out. I'm a huge fan and promoter of kale, but, you could never eat a bite of kale in your life and have a perfectly happy, healthy, good brain. So, but we look at dietary pattern. So it's not that one piece of pizza you eat. It's, do you eat pizza for dinner 3 nights a week? And that overall pattern is what's most clearly correlated with risks of a bunch of illnesses, depression, dementia, ADHD, schizophrenia even.
So how does eating better help all of those conditions?
Well, so the way we want to think about health conditions, in my mind, is looking at this confluence of our genetic risks and our environmental factors. So, for example, the way that I tell patients to think about this is like playing poker, right? You get dealt your hand, but boy, some poker players, no matter what hand they get dealt, they always come out on top. And that's how we want you to be with your genes and your health. The way that it works is that a lot of patients with mental health symptoms, or brain symptoms, as we tend to call them, not enough energy or focus, low mood, irritability, many of those can have nutritional insufficiency causes. And so if you think about something like the long-chain omega-3 fats or vitamin B12 or vitamin B9 folate, low levels of those just simply promote lower moods, less activity, and less energy. And so one way that it's helpful to patients is they're simply just getting more nutrients, and they're getting more nutrients in the healthiest form, which isn't from supplements but from food. The other way that I think it helps patients is it gets people engaged in their life, and there's an effect simply of nourishing yourself, of just taking the time and the energy to prioritize your food and your nutrition, not in a complicated way or in an expensive way, just in a good habit kind of way. And so that's probably one of the most fulfilling parts, I think, of watching people change, is that they just are more engaged with their self-care.
That's important as well. A lot of people aren't very good at self-care. We're too busy and too distracted. And
I know we've gotten so soft as a species. I'm really gotten quite concerned. I hear this all the time. We're too busy, and it's just like, my goodness, what's happened to us, right? I mean, I don't know if you have this experience, but it just seems a little sad to me of all the things that we've prioritized above our own health. It's sorry. the more I hear, it costs too much, takes too much time, it just begins to feel really untrue. And I don't know.
Well, I think.
Do you have that feeling ever? Or am I just being hard?
I do. I think that there's a pile of excuses on top of it. I've got my kids. I can't take, even when I say just 5 minutes before bed, and there's no time for that. I think, though, from what I've gathered, is there's also a kind of shame for taking that time for yourself, especially if you have kids and a spouse and a job, and those things are supposed to be prioritized over ourselves, and we're not looking at what we need, we're looking at what everybody else needs.
That's a huge problem, I would say. I'm a busy parent. I have my clinic. I've got a wonderful spouse. For me to take an hour just for me, I definitely think people have to overcome that feeling of shame. I think the tip in doing that is understanding that you want to be your best self, right? I don't like being around my, kids and being a parent when I'm grumpy and sleep deprived and hungry. I don't think I'm the best husband and dad that I can be. And so, I really believe that this type of maintenance on the self is something that we really need to incorporate. And, I think that honoring that feeling of guilt, that it is a little hard to prioritize yourself. But I think the trick is that you really make a commitment that you're going to use that relaxation for greater good, either within your family or in your community, and simply take pleasure in the self, that you are functioning well and doing well.
Well, I definitely agree, and especially when we're talking about working on food and changing those habits are also nourishing us and helping us feel better, which is what we're talking about here. Yes,
that's really at the root of this work, is giving people more of the right nutrients that we know are, just absolutely essential for brain health and mood, and even now we have some reasonable data that they can be used in the treatment of clinical depression. We've not really had that type of evidence before, but it's really been growing.
So, what is that evidence?
Well, the best evidence is, so for, let's say, about 10 years, there have been these correlational studies. So they'll look at someone's dietary pattern, or one of my favorite researchers, Almu Sanchez-Villegas, is in Spain. And she did a great study. It's using the Sun Navarro data set, where they looked at 10,000 university students, and they followed them over 4 years, and they screened out anybody who already had depression. And they looked at their diets, and they had them fill out all kinds of questionnaires and interviewed them, and they ranked all students on a scale of 1 to 9 in terms of how closely they were following the Mediterranean diet. What they found is the people who were most closely following the Mediterranean diet reduced their risk of depression by about 50%. And depending on how you slice up the numbers, between 40 and 50%. And so that suggests a real powerful potential intervention from food, but it's a correlational study. And so it's just, we can't prove causation with that. Well, this January, Felice Jack is one of the top nutritional psychiatry researchers, and she's the president of our International Society of Nutritional and Psychiatry Research. She completed what's called the SMILES trial, and I encourage everybody just to look it up. It's free online. It's a really nice trial. And they took patients with severe to moderate depression who are already in treatment. And we know a lot of patients don't get better, all the way better, in mental health treatments, right? Your symptoms will get a little bit better, but you're not all the way out of the depression. They gave those individuals a modified Mediterranean diet, or they instructed them on it and had support groups and really got them to shift their food, mainly increasing fish, increasing beans and legumes, increasing nuts, decreasing processed foods, right? Common sense stuff we all know. They found that a third of the people with this resistant depression remitted, meaning they no longer had depression. And if that were a medication study, it would be a multi-billion-dollar drug. I mean, that is a really nice result. And so that's and another trial is coming out actually here in a few months that replicates that finding. So that's the type of data that gets me very excited, because it suggests that there is more than just the good common sense, boy, eat right, feel right, you are what you eat. There's strong evidence that this can be used to really help patients.
Well, it is encouraging because a lot of people, so many people are affected by depression and anxiety, and medications don't get them all the way there, or they're having side effects and they're feeling uncomfortable with their treatment. And so the fact that there's something they can do at home, and we have to buy food anyway. And like you said, so it's not really costing that much, or it's something they would already spend money on, and then they can change their lives that way.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that patients can do it themselves, because it's empowering. If you think that, my other big treatments, I do a lot of psychotherapy, right? So that takes a while and it's expensive and really, I think, very helpful to many people. I use medications for a lot of patients, and there are certainly patients where that's a home run and they do great. But a lot of patients, as you suggest, they still have some residual symptoms, or they end up on, 2 or 3 or 4 medications and have side effects of gaining weight, or, whatever side effects medications can have. And they take a month to work, usually. So I like food. It's like, you're going to eat dinner tonight, right? I want you to look at your plate and think about your brain cells, think about the nutrients that they need, which it's not real hard to learn about, and make sure and focus that those foods are how you're organizing your eating. Not around calories, not around the idea that fat is bad, not all these kind of past notions of nutrition that have been really unhelpful. Really thinking about what are the top sources of long-chain omega-3 fats and phytonutrients and magnesium. We know those are highly correlated with depression. We know that those come in the healthiest foods. Let's fill your plate with those, and you can do that tonight. And it's I think patients like that because it's something they can do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's something to get excited about. Although I think most of us are resistant to change, I find it really exciting to have new ideas, and like you said, start talking about recipes and getting excited about something, as opposed to being depressed and being stuck in that feeling. There's something you can do to move forward out of it. Yeah.
Well, that's the hope that we hope to give patients in our clinic, and that's the result that we're seeing, is that it is a huge factor in people's lives, and something that if you're not eating well, oftentimes people are feeling really guilty about. And if you are eating well, quote unquote well, usually there's some things that we can help people tune up.
Exactly. So we're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Dr. Drew Ramsey. He's the author of Eat Complete. We're going to be back shortly.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
Have you had a chance to check out Voice America's online magazine and blog, Press Pass? If you love our hosts and shows, check out articles that give an even deeper perspective, plus topics about health and fitness, movie reviews, philosophy, business tips and tactics, spirituality, positive thought, current events, and even more about your favorite host. It's just a click away at vapresspass.com. That's vapresspass.com. VA Press Pass by Voice America. All access, all the time.
Become a member of VoiceAmerica.com. It's easy, and best of all, it's free. Start out by going to our homepage or any of our channels and click register at the top. Once you've created an account and signed in, you can create your own custom library, opt into our newsletter, search by show, host, guest, or topic of interest, or browse millions of hours of content across all of our Voice America radio channels. Membership gets you more. Visit VoiceAmerica.com today to get started and tailor the listening experience to your taste.
If you think you've seen online TV before, let us surprise you.
VoiceAmerica.tv is online now.
The leader in live internet talk radio has done it again. Multiple channels, a state-of-the-art viewing experience, live and on-demand programs streaming 24 hours a day. It's exactly what you want, when you want it.
VoiceAmerica.tv.
From health and wellness to business, sports, and everything in between. Discover our new world. Visit VoiceAmerica.tv now and experience the future of online television.
VoiceAmerica.tv.
Follow the Voice America Talk Radio Radio Network on Twitter. We're at Voice America TRN. You'll get the latest fix on what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and general happenings that you should know about at the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Now you don't have to miss anything when you're away from your home or office. Just go to twitter.com/Voice America TRN or follow along with us at Voice America TRN, the Voice America Talk Radio Network. We're on the cutting edge of social media.
Can you keep up?
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Drew Ramsey, and we're discussing his book, Eat Complete. So, Dr. Ramsey, you mentioned before the break about, nutrients and not having enough nutrients can make us, depressed and anxious and all the other illnesses you mentioned. But how can we get the nutrients through food? What do we need to change?
So, if we think about, it's a great question. If we think about what really most Americans or most people in the Western diet need to change, what we do is we focus on food categories, right? And so we try and not just think about, wild salmon, which everyone knows about or hears about, but we try to think about seafood. And what are the superstars in seafood, and is seafood in your diet? And so for most people, if you look across the kind of Western diet, what's missing is seafood. The average American only eats 14 pounds of seafood a year. And one of the biggest shifts that people can make is swapping out processed foods or low-quality meats like deli meats, bologna and ham and turkey, and swapping those out for more nutrient-dense seafoods that are very concentrated in the long-chain omega-3 fats, vitamin B12, zinc, protein, the things that our brain really, really needs and many people aren't getting enough of. If you look at a nutrient like zinc or magnesium, this is really one of the major minerals needed in the brain. Around 50% of Americans don't meet the recommended daily allowance every single day. And so what we do is we look for these food categories like seafood. Another one are leafy greens, right? Just when you look at your plate, are you seeing a lot of beige food? And usually most people are, right? Our fries and our buns and our breads. Or are you seeing a lot of colors on your plate? And usually when you're eating the healthiest food categories, rainbow vegetables, lots of colorful vegetables, leafy greens, some seafood, some grass-fed beef, those foods are quite colorful. But the food categories that we want people really watching and cutting out generally are commercial baked goods. Those increase your risk of depression by 40%. And if you think about what's in commercial baked goods, they're really one of the main sources of simple sugars and set of fats that we generally want people to avoid, vegetable oils. And then, just really what we try to do, so in New York City, we have our nutritional psychiatry clinic called the Brain Food Clinic, and we have a great therapist and chef and food coach there. And we do an assessment and then really try to tailor a plan, not eat this every single day, but let's set some goals, right? If your goal is to eat more seafood, that's a hard thing to do if you don't know how to cook fish or you don't know where to buy fish. Or I didn't start eating seafood until I was about 30. And it just took a little while. So I was scared of fish. I thought I was going to poison myself or, stink up my kitchen. So we set small goals around meals to teach people skills, right? I have a patient I was talking to this morning, and he is trying to eat healthier. He's had a really bad depression. He's gotten a lot better on a little bit of medicine. He's been exercising more. He's been trying to eat better. But when we understand what's the real problem, he just doesn't really like any vegetables. And so we've been setting some goals, and it turns out he does like some vegetables. And even some of the ones you'd never expect. He really loves mushrooms. He likes broccoli and cauliflower. So So then we're working with him. So this week he's going to oven roast some broccoli and cauliflower and let us know how it goes. So those are kind of the ways that we work with patients is to really look at their dietary pattern, see what's missing, and try and help them change that.
So if somebody has made some, I guess, has been eating poorly, like a typical American diet, like you said, very beige, and you're talking about making small steps, what is the most common place where you start with somebody?
Well, so the first place we start is an assessment, and then in that, we're not just assessing what people eat, we're also assessing their motivation, their cooking skills, their level of engagement, right? When we work with an individual who just has no interest in food, helping them make a great wild salmon recipe is not going to be good use of anybody's time. And so we really try to meet people where they are, and I think that's just a big rule in mental health. If you have some bad addiction, my goal in the first session isn't that you walk out, sober. My goal is to meet you and understand where you are and what help you're looking for. And so I think that's really our first step, is that assessment. It's something that we do, or I do both in Eat Complete, of trying to walk people through the assessment that I do in the clinic. And then we also have a new e-course, Eat to Beat Depression, and I walk people through the assessment in video format there. But that's really where, all good healing starts is a detailed assessment of what's going wrong in somebody's eating, what goals they have. And, the nice thing about humans, and especially humans in the modern era, is everybody's got some thoughts about their eating. They think they're not eating well, or they're eating great, or they need to change it. And so that's usually where we start.
So in your book, you talk about the 3 rules of kale. What is that?
So for my book, 50 Shades of Kale, after that happened, we were thinking about how we wanted to stay involved, and felt that there was this some momentum around kale, and we had this cute book. And so we decided to launch National Kale Day. And one of the reasons is that, like, with a lot of superfoods, people think that they're a trend, people think that they kind of came out of nowhere. And it felt to me that, kale is a very ancient food. I mean, it's the first time I ate kale was in rural Kenya, actually, where it's a traditional dish called sukuma wiki. But, kale is eaten around the world. And I felt like people were missing the point a little bit, that, kale is this trendy thing that's going to save your health. And I thought the real reason that kale was trendy, as opposed to something like cauliflower or broccoli, both also popular vegetables, but kale has a few attributes. The first is it teaches us the rule of nutrient density. And nutrient density means a food has more nutrients per calorie. So a classic example would be a can of soda. Now, soda really just has calories, about 140 calories in a can of soda, and it doesn't come with any nutrients, really nothing that your brain uses except for the sugar. Compare that with 140 calories of kale. Well, first of all, that would be 4.5 cups of kale. And in 4.5 cups of kale, I mean, my goodness, I don't know if I can do the math, you're going to get over 2,000% of your vitamin K, you're going to get 800% of your daily vitamin A, you're going to get 600% of your daily vitamin C, and on and on, right? Folate, you get more absorbable calcium in kale than you do in milk. So there's just a number of, so that's nutrient density, right? 140 calories, the same amount of energy in both of these, a can of soda and 4.5 cups of kale. But the kale comes with nutrients, so that's nutrient density. And kale really teaches that lesson well, as do all leafy greens, right? They're just packed with nutrition. The second rule of kale is culinary versatility. Now, people don't believe me when I say this because they think, yuck, kale, it tastes like dirt, what do you do with it? But kale and most greens can be incorporated into all kinds of foods. So I'll go out to my garden and pick a little kale and saute it up and have it with my eggs in the morning. Really, really filling, healthy breakfast. You can have a kale salad for lunch or kale soup. You can make a kale cocktail or kale pesto. Right? There's all kinds of different ways to use kale. And that's what we want in people's kitchens and in their fridges. We want them to be full of nutrient-dense foods. Because no matter what you pull out and put together, it's healthy for you. And then the last lesson from kale, the rule of kale, is local availability. Just to emphasize emphasizing the need for us all to focus on the foods that are available to us and affordable to us in our communities. And kale fits the bill. It's $3 for a bunch of organic kale pretty much anywhere. And it's one of those foods that, lasts a long time. You put a big bunch of kale in the fridge, and in 2 weeks, it's still looking pretty good, unlike something like a mesclun green or arugula, which is got a shorter shelf life. So I think those, if you look at a food and think, okay, is it nutrient dense? Can I do a lot of fun things with it in my kitchen? And can I get it locally? If the answer is yes, odds are it's probably very good for your brain.
What are complex carbohydrates?
Okay, so complex carbohydrates are the good carbs as we think about them. So carbohydrates, all of them, simple, are sugars. It's another way to say sugar. So glucose is a carbohydrate. When you take glucose, which is blood sugar, it's a simple 6-carbon sugar, and you string them together. If you string them together in a certain way, you make fiber. Fiber is simply long chains of sugar that our body can't digest. So it passes through us until it gets down to the colon, where it's eaten by the microbiome, by the bacteria that live in our colon. Complex carbohydrates increase your blood sugar less because they're bound up with one another, so you have to break them down. Simple sugars are things just like glucose and fructose, or when you drink soda, sucrose, and they're just the sugar molecule. It hits your stomach, it's rapidly absorbed, and it hits your bloodstream, and so your blood sugar goes up. And the issue with that is, our blood sugar is going up when we eat isn't that big of a deal, except when it's a big spike or it's a huge sugar load. Because as I tell patients, everything you put in your mouth, your body has to deal with. And it's sort of like, it's kind of like the mail, right? If you're sitting by your mail slot in your front door, and someone just keeps shoving junk mail in, well, it's going to take a while to deal with all that. You got to open the envelopes or throw them out, and so it's a little like that with eating, right? You only want to put stuff in there that is in a certain amount, right? And so complex carbohydrates, again, they don't spike your blood sugar. They aren't correlated with the same types of diseases that simple sugars are, and have that fatigue, and they fill you up because generally complex carbohydrates have a lot of fiber in them. Right? Think about something like brown rice versus white rice. Brown rice has loads more nutrients. It has lots of fiber, so it's going to keep you full longer. And because it has more complex carbohydrate, it's not going to cause your blood sugar to go as high.
So, how are fermented grains important in this process?
Yeah, so there's a lot of fermented foods in general, just so everybody hears the message, I think are really great for your health. And the reason is that, first of all, we've always fermented food. And fermenting is kind of like pre-digesting. So I think the best example is with gluten. And if you take somebody who's sensitivity to gluten, a lot of them can eat sourdough bread, or especially like a doubly fermented bread, because when you ferment grains, the bacteria break down a lot of the proteins and sugars for us. Fermented grains, I think, are quite interesting because they make grains a little healthier. And particularly, I guess, fermented dairy is what I tend to focus on a little bit more. Fermenting grains, is a little less common. I think one of the things I see more people doing with the grains are sprouting them, which is, again, another way to kind of increase the health quotient of the food.
Well, I think especially with the fermentation, from what I understand, this is traditionally how a lot of breads were made. And then to make it faster, we started to add yeast so that we could make it in factories. And some people believe that's where our sensitivity is coming from, is bread isn't made the way that it was traditionally.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I would agree with that. That traditionally we've fermented grains to make breads, and that has lowered gluten levels. And if you look at modern bread, they add in a lot of gluten. So there's kind of an increased exposure. And again, going back to that notion of this is about your genetic risks versus your environmental load. And so if you have a little bit of sensitivity, boy, you're getting just gluten poured all over you. you're going to be more likely to have symptoms and develop a problem.
Well, it makes sense, even with just anything, whether it's gluten or whether we're looking at sugar, that we should vary what we're eating so that we're not getting overloaded with anything.
Yeah.
We are going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Dr. Drew Ramsey. We're discussing his book, Eat Complete. We'll be back shortly.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
Want to know what's going on behind the scenes with your favorite Voice America Talk Radio Network host? How about what's new with our network? Make sure you check out the iRadio blog, a look at what's hot at Voice America and beyond. Visit www.iradioblog.com today. Get the inside scoop on every channel on our network, including breaking news, featured guests, blog posts from our hosts, and much more. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter for even more inside action. Visit iradioblog.com today and stay connected.
If you're an influencer, you don't follow the trends, you set them. Voice America influencers are involved in creating change in personal and professional lives, collaborating and driving value to make our lives better. We have world-renowned thought leaders, speakers, authors, entrepreneurs, artists, and some of the most influential voices today. Listen in today to what they have to say. Engage in the conversation. The Voice America Influencers Channel. Be inspired. Answer the call.
Have you friended us on Facebook yet? Why not? Just go to facebook.com/Voice America or search for the keywords Voice America. Once you are part of our Facebook network, you'll receive daily messages about what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and new happenings of the Voice America Talk Radio Network. And you can add your voice to the always active discussions on our wall. Just go to facebook.com/Voice America or search for Voice America.
Tune in to the Voice America Variety channel on the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Voice America Variety broadcasts a diverse array of topics, reaching a global community. Our experts come from all walks of life, and the topics they discuss are everything from current events, arts and entertainment, leadership, parenting, relationships, self-improvement, career advice, and a variety of other topics. Check us out today. You're sure to find something of interest. Voice America Variety. Talk on today's hot topics. Now you can take your favorite Voice America radio program with you anywhere. Sign up for our mobile app if you have an iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry. The Voice America Interactive Radio Player, powered by Aircast, gives you the freedom to listen to any of our programs, anywhere, live and on demand. No registration is required. Listen to your favorite Voice America hosts and discover new ones. Download the Voice America mobile app for iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry, powered by Aircast. Visit the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Falling Through the Cracks. Today we're talking with Dr. Drew Ramsey, and we're discussing his book, Eat Complete. So, Dr. Ramsey, in your book, you talk about the 21 essential nutrients that we get from food, and then you break that up. So what are the 7 nutrients for foundation?
So, I wasn't expecting a quiz here. Let me see if I can pull the 7 off the top of my head.
Or just, what does that mean?
Okay, so 7 for foundation. I wanted to divide up the 21 nutrients because there are more than 21 nutrients. There are 34 essential nutrients and minerals, but these are the ones that had the most data, that they really are important in brain health. And I wanted to split them up into the nutrients that were foundational, meaning that you really need them to build a good brain. So things like the long-chain omega-3 fats or vitamin B12 or zinc. These are really nutrients that are workhorses of the brain. We know people get really low intakes of them, and those are foundational. The next 7 I wanted to focus on were around protection, right? So how do you protect this brain? And then I wanted to also focus on 7 that dealt with what I call ignition, because the brain is a real energetic workhorse. I mean, your brain burns about 420 calories a day, and burning all that fuel creates a lot of waste, but also just requires a lot of careful biochemistry in the brain, right? So so those are nutrients for protection, and those are those are nutrients for ignition. So something like vitamin B1 or thiamine. And again, a lot of people don't think that, the top source of thiamine is pork. And so people don't really think about a pork chop as like, wow, that has some amazing brain nutrients in it and something I should eat every now and then. Nutrients for protection are things like vitamin E. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble nutrient. Your brain's mainly made of fat. And so it helps protect the brain fat. Or some of the phytonutrients. We're learning all this exciting science about how molecules in plants can decrease inflammation and kind of, again, help protect the brain.
So how important are fats in this process?
Fats are essential because fats are, again, what your brain is made of. And fats are important right now in history because we've gotten fat wrong. People are interested in sort of the history of the last 100 years in terms of food. It's been a radical experiment. I just heard the acting head of nutritional neuroscience, Dr. Hibbelin, speak at a conference. And Dr. Hibbelin is, as credentialed as you get. He's at NIH and the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse. And he basically pointed out that we have put our population under an experiment where we switched all of the fats from traditional fats that we would get from generally from meats and seafoods to vegetable oils. And by doing that, we've increased our intake of a fat called the omega-6 fatty acids. These are very important fats for us, but they're kind of like the SWAT team with fats. We use them to make our inflammatory response. And as opposed to other fats such as the omega-3 fats, which we've been talking about. Omega-3 fats, they are profoundly anti-inflammatory. We know the highest concentration of your long-chain omega-3 fats are in your brain cells. And so fat and not fearing fat is really one of the fundamental parts of eater rehabilitation for a lot of people. That, in your kitchen, in Eat Complete, I just use 3 fats. I say, hey, let's use extra virgin olive oil, because everybody agrees that's really healthy. It's great for you to use in lots of amounts on your salads, on your, in your vegetable dishes. I use a little bit of coconut oil, just that, it's a very interesting fat, and I find really helps people access things like greens and gives them a little coconut flavor. And then I use a little butter, just because I think a little butter goes a long way for, again, improving the palatability for some people. And that's it. And the goal there is to really help people avoid the soybean oils, corn oil, sunflower oil, all these other oils that are really inexpensive, but we've never, ever, ever in the history of humankind eaten as much of them as we have. And it's literally changed the fats in our body. If you look at a fat biopsy of a person now, there's lots and lots of omega-6 fats. There's actually a fair number of trans fats still. And that was never the case in human history. So that's probably part of what we're seeing in terms of the health epidemic, is this change in fats.
So one thing you talk about a lot in your book is choosing the right proteins, which can be complicated for some people. Can you just explain the best way to go about that?
Sure. Here's what most people should do for protein. First of all, what most people need to do is realize that lentils and beans are an amazing source of protein and should be in your diet regularly. Like, I would say one of the top dishes in my household for my wife and kids is we eat lentils at least once a week. We'll have it over brown rice. We'll have it over greens. We'll have a little feta cheese, and red or black beans. Just really, really great for your health. people say, oh, beans make me so gassy. That's because you're not eating beans. Once you start eating beans, your gut adjusts, and they're not as gas-inducing. Other great sources of protein, eggs. Really like eggs in general. I know a lot of physicians don't recommend them because of the dietary cholesterol, but really if you look at the data clearly and closely, dietary cholesterol does not have a lot to do with your blood cholesterol levels. And eggs, again, they hit that rule of kale, right? They're really nutrient dense, lots of protein, B12, B9, lots of what's called choline, which is a B-like vitamin that doesn't get a lot of airtime. It's a lot like folate, really important. So I like eggs. I like grass-fed beef. I think it's a really interesting way to think about beef because it causes people to have to reconsider what beef is, right? When you hear a cut of beef that has a third fewer calories and more nutrients, that begins to sound pretty interesting. And that's what grass-fed beef is. And then mainly seafood. The big protein source people miss is seafood. Like a good example are mussels. I mean, mussels are just full of protein, very few calories, lots of B12, zinc, omega-3 fats. So mussels, clams, and oysters, I guess the bivalves are a big food category that we emphasize. And those would be the go-to places for protein, I would say, for most people. I'm not a big advocate of eating poultry, not for any particular reason. I just don't find it to be very nutrient dense. But, there's nothing wrong with it for the most part. But those would be the protein sources that I think are least controversial and good for you.
So I know there's a lot of people that are vegetarian or vegan. How can they be sure to get the right nutrients in their diet with not eating meat?
Well, so if you choose not to eat meat, so I was a vegetarian for about 10 years, and so I don't want people to think that I'm a big meat advocate without some experience on both sides. A vegetarian and vegan diets, and sort of separate those. Vegetarian diets where folks aren't eating any meat or fish. So right there, if you're not eating seafood or fish, I get a little concerned, especially if you have a history or struggling with your mood in some way. And, I've had a number of patients eating vegetarian diets who just need some meat. And when they begin to eat, small amounts of meat or more seafood, their energy improves, their mood is improved. And part of that reason is don't give some nutrients very easily, things like zinc and calcium that can hang on to those. And the other is just certain nutrients aren't available in plants. So think about the long-chain omega-3 fats. Those bioconcentrated, and they're made by algae, actually, but those are often very hard to find, and you can't find in the plant world. Find shorter omega-3 fats, ALA. The long-chain fats, omega-3 fats, DHA and EPA, are really only found in seafood. So when people are eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, I often think they need to supplement with an omega-3 fat. And certainly, like the biggest health advisory, if people are trying a vegan diet, you must take a B12 supplement. I mean, that is really one of the most dangerous things out there is folks, doing their best to when they start eating it. And, over time you become B12 deficient. There are actually 30 case reports in the literature of women vegan having kids with permanent learning deficits and brain atrophy. That's just because there just wasn't enough B12 in their diet. So I would actually say at this point, based on the evidence, in my opinion, vegetarian and vegan diet should be contraindicated in pregnancy. Just if you look at the outcome measures of and the nutrients needed for brain health and kids, I know it's a little controversial to say maybe, but it seems pretty clear to me that the year before pregnancy, we want women eating a lot of omega-3 fats and long-chain, long-chain fats, and that's where you get much better outcomes, talking like 5 to 9 extra IQ points.
Is there, if people are listening to the show, I know we already mentioned this before, but what should be the first thing that they start with if they're going to take anything from the show today?
Okay, so the number one thing I'd want you to think about are there enough seafood and leafy greens in your diet? I just think those are the two food categories that if you start putting in more dark leafy greens, more spinach, kale, Swiss chard, arugula, just putting that in anything, your health's going to improve. You're gonna feel more energetic, and likely you're going to lose weight. The second is seafood. I'm just really trying to get wiser and more versatile in your seafood. Things like ceviche. Again, we were talking earlier about, people say there's not enough time. A ceviche means chopping up some shrimp, scallops, fish, and putting it in lime juice, maybe with a little bit of chopped onion, and walking away and coming back in 45 minutes. I mean, that's just as easy as it gets. There's no muss, there's no fuss. So seafood and leafy greens are really where I emphasize, people to start. And then, I would just say awareness of part of Eat Complete is just asking people, making requests that people just be more mindful. I find so many folks at mealtime, they're rushing, they're gulping it down, they're looking at their phone, and just, to think about your food in maybe a little bit more of an almost spiritual way, that it's a time to really feel very connected to your own efforts to bring that meal, but also all of the efforts and energies involved to get that food onto your plate, and how fortunate you are to have food, and to really sit with that food and take some deep breaths. Probably my favorite part of writing Eat Complete was really thinking about some of these non-nutrient aspects of healthy brain eating. And I really just kept coming back to that concept of mindfulness. Do you look at your food and really recognize it, or are you having those meals that we've all had them, right? You blink or you go to get that last bite and your plate's empty because you've just shoveled it in, and you think, I was on autopilot there. And it's like, yeah, you were, and that's not the healthiest way to eat. It's not going to allow you to chew. It's not going to let your body to relax and digest.
So is there any way that people can get a hold of you or more information if they need it?
Yeah, sure. We're easy. So the Brain Food Clinic, you can find info about the clinic and info about my practice and some of the other work I've done with my TEDx talks and the books at drewramseymd.com. I'm loving Instagram and Facebook. I spend a lot of time posting and interacting and engaging on social. And so if you're on Instagram or Facebook, check me out. I'm Drew Ramsey, MD, and would appreciate the follow and look forward to getting engaged with folks who are interested in these topics. And then the last thing is we now have an e-course, Eat to Beat Depression. This is for people who depression is, influencing your life. Maybe you don't have a clinical depression, but, you're struggling with your mood, or maybe you have a family member with depression. And it's an e-course with, it has about 60 short videos where I go through all the information we're talking about today to really do a quick distillation about something like B12 or omega-3 fats, what it is, why you need it, what foods you find it in. And so you can also learn about Eat to Beat Depression at my site, drewramseymd.com.
Well, perfect. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. And thanks for spreading all the news about health.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Just be sure to make today a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive. Please join Dr. Rebecca Risk again next Monday at noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. We'll talk more next week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views